Hi, welcome to the Catholic Corner. I'm Monsignor Walter Nolan. My guest today is an old friend, beautiful friend, MaryAnn Raccosta. She has a wonderful story to tell. It's about her life, love, courage, hope. MaryAnn and her husband, Jim, have two sons, James and Sam, and a daughter, Gabrielle. James and Sam have a rare life-threatening metabolic disorder. Some of you might remember MaryAnn was a guest here on our Catholic Corner a few years back with her children, James, Sam, and Gabrielle. I still remember that show. They shared with us the challenge and struggles that they faced as a family. At the time, MaryAnn was beginning to write a book. And you know what? She's back with her book. MaryAnn, thanks for coming back to us.
Thank you.
So today she's going to talk to us a little bit about her beautiful book and her marvelous, marvelous story of courage and love. The book's called The Survivor, The Hero, The Angel, A Mother's Story, One Decade. Some of the comments from the back cover of the book. Lynn Frost, a physical therapist, writes, an inspiring, heartwarming story about a family's challenge and how they've overcome. Mike Marr, a former speechwriter for 3 New Jersey governors, writes, MaryAnn Raccosta pours love and faith into everything she does, including her book. She relates the family's medical odyssey with a light touch and with a joyful heart that sees God's hand in even the most difficult and desperate circumstances. What a beautiful quote.
He's a good friend.
Good friend from the high school days.
From high school days.
God bless him. He is a wonderful, wonderful young man, and you're a wonderful, wonderful young woman.
Thank you.
So welcome. Thanks for coming back, MaryAnn.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Tell us briefly again about your life and family and the challenge you face with this catastrophically illness of your children.
Right. It's the illness is TriFunctional protein deficiency. It's a metabolic disorder, and it affected just a handful of children in the world. When my first son was diagnosed in 1999, he was the 6th case in the world.
In the world?
In the world. So it's quite unique, and although the story surrounds the illness of my boys, it's a much broader story. It's one of my family, of courage, of survival, and you can relate to it even if you don't have an ill child. It's a universal story about taking each day, living to the fullest, and moving on with courage, accepting what you have and trying to make the best of it.
Don't we all have a story to tell?
We do have, yes, yes.
You know.
And that's the thing, the subtitle, A Mother's Story, I think it appeals to the audience because we all do have a story to tell. And it's not just the rarity of the boys that makes it a good story. What makes it a good story is because it is simple. It's a family story, just like anyone else out there, but taking what God has given us and using it to the fullest.
Can you tell me just a little bit about the disease, though? I mean, you say it's so rare, but how does it happen? I mean, what?
Right. What happens is once you get into this medical world like this, you find out that there's a lot of those rare disorders. This one happens to be a genetic disorder that there was no family history on either side, my husband's side or my side. One gene in my husband and one gene in me happen to get together. So if either of us had married someone else, it wouldn't have happened. And it's a metabolic disorder that affects the boys' cells so they can't metabolize long-chain fat. So they can never fast. When they're stressed, they use muscle for energy instead of going to their cells that provide nutrients because they can't use fat. So they have to really eliminate all fat from their diet, never fast. When ill, they have to get IV fluids right away. And with my boys' particular disorder, what happens to them is they can no longer move their diaphragm, so breathing becomes an issue, or it can affect their heart, their eyes, anything that runs on fat in our system.
You're talking about story I read a while back one of the great saints said that every story is a story of God, and every book is a book about God. And that's really what you're doing and saying.
Thank you. That's what I'm trying to say. You know, I think people can relate because everybody's had some kind of anguish, some unforeseen chaos, whether it's, you know, a financial burden or look, the Sandy victims right now. You know, how do you, or the 9/11 occasion, how do you pick up the pieces and just keep moving forward? And again, it could be anybody that you see on the street has a story. You don't know what's going on in their life.
And once you know their story, you really start to understand and see, I think, a whole different person in a sense. You know, because now you understand. I mean, there's a marvelous story I came across one time about a gentleman on a train. It was early in the morning, and train stopped, and another gentleman got on with a couple of kids, you know, and the kids were running around, and the first gentleman said to him something about, he said, "Can't you control your children?" And he said, "Yes, sir." He said, I know you're right." He said, "But, you know, they just lost their mother in the hospital, and all of a sudden the whole thing changes, you know.
Right.
You start to see
Right.
the whole difference in
I even use my story with road rage now. If anybody's driving like a lunatic, I say, "Oh, they're rushing to the hospital. You know, let them pass because
right.
you know they have an emergency that's going on."
That's why you're a saint. So when did you decide to write the book? I mean, here you are with a mom with 3 children and family, like every family, with all kinds of this going on and that going on. And all of a sudden you said, "I'll write a book."
I'm going to write a book. Well, I always wanted to write a book. Ever since I was young, I wanted to write a story. I just never knew that the story was going to be about my children and my family. And as you know, I even had trying things when I was young. My mother dying, my father dying, you know, when I was young. So I always had the thought that you live for today and life is precious. And it wasn't until my boys happened that I thought, you know, this could be a really good story. And it didn't start off that way. It started off just capturing the events, the medical events that happened, because I needed to then regurgitate it again for the next doctor and the next week and the next admission.
So were you taking notes? I mean, would
So
you
I
like
wrote
write down some
I
in
kept a journal in the hospital. And then as the years went on, kept journaling, and about 4 or 5 years ago said, you know, this would be a good story, and try to start it compartmentalizing, I guess, putting them, oh, well, this should go in this chapter, and this should go in this chapter. And it took, so the writing has been a long time. The writing of the story took about 4 years, though.
4 years.
Yeah, writing in the middle of the night, waking up with an idea, staying up until the birds were chirping, and
your husband Jim saying, "Why don't you go to bed?"
Right. Well, that was the quiet time, so that's when I did my most productive writing, when everybody was sleeping. And I met with a consultant, and she said, "Yeah, this could be good," you know. And so then just kept writing, and I never knew how it was going to end. And it ended with my son's 10th birthday. So that's why it's a mother story, 1 decade, because it's 10 years of
The story doesn't end.
the life. The story doesn't end.
The story doesn't end.
Right. What makes for a sequel.
There you go. There you go. And I also think this, you know, not being an expert on stories, but when you write a story like that, I think when someone reads it and processes it to themselves, their own life gets into the story, and they write their own end, so to speak. You know, they
Right.
can put their own ending on the story.
They identify, I think, of what would I do, or what would I say, or this is a different way of looking at something.
What kind of a response have you gotten so far?
So far, so good. It came out in August. August 7th was the published date. And to date, we've sold about 500 books. And, you know, I'm still trying to get the word out there. But I have people coming up saying, you know, I really identified. Or, and of course, it's geared mostly to women because it's a mother's story. But I have men who have read it who said, you know, I haven't read a book in 16 years. And I picked it up and I read it cover to cover, and I was crying, you know. So I think that people who read it will put themselves in the story. It's an easy read, so it's like they're talking to me and walking along with me through, you know, the good times and the bad.
Now, did you have a publisher, or how does it get published?
I tried since the last show. I had been still looking for a publisher at that point. And it's a very complicated, trying to get you need a literary agent, and then you find the publisher. So I decided to look on the online independent publishers. So I went through Amazon.com and worked directly with a company called CreateSpace. So it's, with all this technology today, like we were just talking about, it's a easier way to get the word out. You don't have to put a whole lot of money up front, which I don't have. So it was a good way to get the word out and, get a professional book on the market.
And when you were doing all of this, I'm sure that somehow it was a personal, satisfying endeavor. But what were your hopes and dreams for those who would read it? And I just know you too well to know that you're not doing this to become a millionaire or whatever.
No.
You put all that time in, and probably, I'm sure, shared the story with your family back and forth over meals.
Yeah, I think in the beginning, I wanted to just capture the story. And then as I thought that people would relate to it other than just my family, first, for me, it's gratifying, to actually have the book, have it finished, be able to pick it up and read it at any time. And it is a legacy, really, for my children to see this is what, mom and dad were going through, and this is what your grandparents taught me, and now this is what I want to try to teach you. So there's sort of a sense of a generational learning experience, tradition, so to speak. So now I have this, item that I can pass down. For others who aren't in the family, I hope that they'll pick it up and say, you know what, we all have our story, we all have our family, and we're all given a day to either choose to be negative or to be positive. So I'm hoping that they'll read the story and choose to be positive and choose to pass on hope and love as opposed to, greed or negativity.
So you can tell people that there is hope, and no matter what your life is, that there's something we can all find joy and happiness in.
Exactly.
Terrific.
Right. Yes.
What's the main message of the book?
The main message of the book, everybody, it's hard because, although it's about the boys, it really is not about the boys. And although it's about my family and chaos and happiness and all of that, it's really about the courage to face each day, the courage to find our purpose in life, which I feel is to find love, God's love, and be able to pass on God's love. And with the book too, we were chatting a little bit about, heaven and earth and death and, life. At some point, we're all going to die. And when we're at that point, will we have God's grace to say, I'm okay now. I've done good things on this earth. So again, I'm hoping people will pick it up and say, what can I do today with God by my side? What am I supposed to do? What's my purpose here? And how can I make a positive impact of, hope and love?
None of us is an island, right?
That is true, right?
We're all connected. I mean, that's so true. And the more we understand that, I think, MaryAnn, the more we kind of feel that we do have that purpose. We are our brother's keeper, so to speak.
Right.
And we find that, I think, most of all, we find it in family, I think.
Right.
So you dedicated your book to your beautiful husband and your boys and some friends, but there's a special angel.
There is a special angel.
Tell us all about the special angel.
Yeah, the book is dedicated to my daughter, Gabrielle. She is my only daughter, but it's dedicated to her because I just wanted to have her really know how much I love her. And that even through all of the years that we had to prioritize her brother's lives.
Gabriel is older.
Gabrielle is the oldest, yeah. That even though there were times that it may have appeared as though we had to put her brothers first, which we did, we had to put her brothers first, that we never for a minute, my husband and I, forgot about her life or her security or what was important to her. And she is my angel. Now, I'm not going to give away who's the survivor, the hero, or the angel. She begins as the angel because she's 4 years old. She's a 4-year-old innocent toddler who now has a brother. She, steps up the notch to big sister, and then he's constantly in the hospital. And then she ends. Well, I am giving some of it away. She ends the survivor. She's a teenager now. She's 17. She'll be graduating from high school and pursuing a college education to become a teacher. And she's compassionate and loving, and she's fair, and she's, tolerant of a lot of things and situations. And, she's not materialistic at all because she really has learned, she has her own story. Sure. So that's why it's dedicated to her. The love that you share in your family, and Gabriel sees that will always be a blessing to her. I mean, she'll be the woman that you are. I hope.
Which is a nice thing to.
Well, thank you.
No, that will happen. Tell me though that I was just wondering as we were talking about your angel, would this book be a good book for say other sibling children who are in a situation, that might say, gee, what about me? Or, give me some time, or to give them some insight into how the love of the family really is also a part of their life and their growth.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the book, I'm not sure if a young person might grab that context from it, but I think certainly for the parents who have ill children, to remember that there are the siblings, the healthy siblings, who a lot of times get lost in the shuffle. That their life is just as important. And I have been very fortunate to have family members, my in-laws, who were there to just step in at the moment's notice to help us keep my daughter secure. So I definitely think for parents of ill children to remember that the healthy siblings are just as important. And, maybe for the teens or the other children, when they read it, maybe they will identify with how much chaos the parents are going through and how much stress that they have on them, that, maybe a little bit of forgiveness could enter into the scenario because they, can see, oh, wow, this is what they're really going through.
I know you have family, friends, which is a beautiful thing. I've often wondered, MaryAnn, if going back in my mind anyway, years ago, families were closer, brothers and sisters lived closer. It was just a different way of life. But there seemed like a lot of support because we all lived around each other.
Right.
Nowadays, it does seem like society, colleges go here and jobs go there. And is that part of your understanding, or hopefully that people will realize that we have to be a little connected, or the connectedness helps us?
Yeah, I think that, I hope. I mean, there's a lot of underlying messages in the book, and I think one of them is partly that. That we are a community, and God doesn't want us to live alone. He wants us to, for women who need to have friends, for teenagers who need to branch out. And like you're saying, there isn't that sense of community anymore, and we need to have that sense of community. We need to have that family dinner time. We need to, turn off the TV and, have a family night, even if you just, sit around and talk to each other. So there is a message in the book that says, although I'm thrilled with technology, because really my children wouldn't be here if it wasn't for breathing tubes and medical equipment, that I wonder sometimes, is technology helping us or hurting us? And there's passages in the book where I'm going away to Virginia to see my sister who lives in the mountains, and it's just beautiful down there, and how serene that feels, and how we don't need technology when we're there. The kids are playing outside and, with the rocks and searching for, what do you call it, crystals, or, watching the horses, or just looking at the sunset, or having a beautiful bonfire. So, and even with the lack of electricity a few weeks ago, it was wonderful because we sat with a candle. We didn't have anything. We put the little battery-operated radio, and we're listening to old school, which was, to me, was the best party of all, where we could really just enjoy each other's company.
As long as it doesn't last too long.
Right, exactly. As long as we had hot water and we knew it was coming back someday.
Oh, you're marvelous. Tell me something. Ron Howard, you want to meet him, or have you met him?
I would love to meet him,
But you haven't.
No, not yet.
Why do you want to meet him?
Well, I just, I would love for the story. For me, my book, The Survivor, the Hero, and the Angel, for me, it feels like a Christmas story. And, all along with, the trying to promote the book, trying to write the book, I kept saying to myself, this really could be a great It's a Wonderful Life, And, or I thought, well, maybe we can call it Miracle on 34th and Civic, since most of it happened at Children's Hospital, Philadelphia. But for me, number one, I love that story. It's a Wonderful Life. And I thought to myself, I'm just an ordinary person, just like George Bailey was. And he never quite got his dream. He never quite got to go on his trips. He never quite. But what he ended up finding was something that was more miraculous. He found his wife, he had his children, he had his broken down house. And in the end, he realized it's a wonderful life. So Ron Howard, I think, could do a really great rendition, because I always still think he's Opie, from Andy Griffith days. It would be wonderful to meet him and see if he could, turn it into something.
Well, listen, that would be marvelous. But when you say that, I often think back at my own life and looking back, and I say, it is. If you let it happen, it is a wonderful life.
Mm-hmm.
We can all struggle with lots of things, but there's a tremendous amount of love in the world. There's a tremendous amount of love of people who love us and love you and you love them, and it is a wonderful life if you kind of let it happen.
If you let it, right?
You gotta let it happen, yeah. Is this book a reality check for some people? Maybe focus too much on this world and they don't give enough time to just sit back and maybe get a little quiet and allow themselves to feel God and whatever else?
I think so. I myself even pick up the book from time to time and read passages again and say, oh yeah, I got to stop. I have to remember that we're given each day, and what are we doing with that day? So I hope for some that it's a spiritual book that allows us to really think about what are we doing? What are we saying? What are we teaching to our children? What are we passing on to the next generation? And with all that said, in the end, we are all gonna die someday. And I think that revelation came, as I'm sitting in the hospital rooms, wondering if my children are gonna make it when they were, 9 months, 2 years, 3 years, and then with my other son, 2 years, 3 years. Are they going to survive? Are they going to survive? And I think at some point I came to a peace with, someday they may die, but someday I may die. Someday
Someday we might be all together.
Yeah, and that will be okay. Yeah. That with the grace of God, even that will be okay.
What are some of your favorite parts of the book? There are some a little more.
I do have favorite parts. I have some funny parts that are in there. One of the best pieces, as I was writing and then doing some research for it, I came across a book of Mother Teresa, and it said her quote was, we must see what lies before our own eyes. And that's one of my favorite pieces, that yes, we need to focus on, this person that's in front of us. And then one of my pieces that I like in there is, to billow with the wind, that time passes, and unless we stop to feel it, sense it, and billow with it. And in a sense mean, take each moment and enjoy the day, feel the day, kind of put yourself in check and do the best that you can, but then roll with the punches, billow with the wind. So maybe someday we'll have little T-shirts that say "Billow with the wind."
It's also nice when you say that. I say to myself, and it's nice to talk to God. Sometimes we get so busy we forget that we can say hello to Him, and like you said, say, gee, it's nice to have wind in my face, or
Right.
it's nice to. Do you have any special quotes that of yourself even in the book, or something
Well,
that you've said
that
yourself?
one was one of my special quotes. The other one is, life is a matter of perception and perspective. And some people might say, oh, isn't that the same word? But the perspective of what angle are you looking at your life from, and perception, what are you feeling? And again, everybody does have their story. Everybody is, you don't know what's going on in their family, in their job. Are they stressed? Are they not? Again, just with the road rage. If somebody's going crazy, then just get out of their way. Like, don't let it ruin your day. Try to find your peace. And
I've known you since you were a little kid. I shouldn't say a little kid, but a kid.
Teenager.
And I've known your family, and marvelous. Your faith has really helped you, hasn't it, through some tough times before marriage and now.
Right. Again, I think I've always had faith. My dad died when I was 11 or 12,
Sure.
and, my mom when I was 19. So I always knew that God was important. And I think it just got stronger. I don't feel angry, oh gosh, why do you give me these burdens? I feel like with these burdens, how can you help me get through it?
Your mom and dad gave you a lot of strength and a lot of love. You're a beautiful, beautiful young lady. So God bless you, and thank you.
Thank you for
For
having
more
me.
information about MaryAnn's book, The Survivor, the Hero, and the Angel, go to Amazon.com. Maybe write your own book. Let the story be your story, because it's God's story.